So we are in this sermon series that we've just started called Up, exploring the idea of moving upwards in the Bible. And this famous story that we'll take a look at together this afternoon is perhaps one of the most literal accounts of going up in the Bible, the Tower of Babel. So Babel is a literal tower that is built upwards to the sky. So really, no more boxes could be ticked in a sermon series called Up. But what we're going to do and what we're going to see and learn from this passage is that the idea of moving up is complicated. It is not neutral, because in the account, here's what we'll see. We'll see something about the human heart. We'll see something about human community. And we'll see something about what God does in response. Something about the heart, something about community, and then something about how God responds to this. So let's start with what we see about the human heart. And I want to start with a problem, because what is going on at Babel? Here you have early humanity, small population at this point, and there is a single language, verse 1 says, and a common speech. And they've gathered in a place called Shinar, which is what we would identify as Babylonia, which is what verse 2 tells us. And they decide to build a city with a tower in the center of it. Look at verse 4. They say this: "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens." Now, the tower that they're building is most likely a ziggurat. Have you seen those stacked towers? Think about the step flights of stairs, layer on layer. They get narrower and narrower, and then there's kind of a flat platform at the top. That's kind of think less sort of Burj Khalifa or skyscraper. Certainly not pyramids. This is kind of a ziggurat. Now, why do they do it? Why they decide to build this tower? Well, this isn't a search for God. This isn't a group of humans trying to get to heaven, to find God, to discover Him, to worship Him. This isn't a spiritual search. You know what this is? This is a naked power grab. That's what it is. They're really, really clear. Listen to the rest of verse 4. They say, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Now, what they actually say in the Hebrew, where this is originally written, is they want a heaven-topped tower. That's what they're trying to build here. The purpose of the Tower of Babel is to tie the city to heaven. Now, we're going to find out there's lots of wordplay in the text here. And Babel means a few different things. But in Babylonian, it means gate of God. This is human beings wanting to be in the place of God. They want to rule in the way that only God can. Last week we thought about the early chapters of Genesis, and really this is the Garden of Eden all over again. Because what you have right in the early chapters of Genesis is that human beings want to be like God. And from that moment forth, every human heart shares the same desire. And you know what's fascinating, actually, is nearly every honest thinker and writer, whether they're a Christian or not, has in some way, shape, or form seen this. So Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a French philosopher, he saw it perfectly, and he described human beings like this: man is the being whose project is to be God. Do you hear that? It's our project. It's what we work at. It's what we do. Babel reveals our hearts. We aspire, every one of us, to be as God. Babel is about making a world where God is redundant. They want I need you to see this. They want a world with no God above, because they want to run a world in the way they choose, and so do we. Babel is a symbol of the human heart, self-sufficiency without God. See, that's the problem that our hearts have. But can I push you deeper? What explains that? Well, here's a second thing you see about the heart. You see the need of the heart. Did you hear what verse 4, the way verse 4 puts it? It says they want a name. They want to build a tower because they want a name. Now, what does it mean to have a name? Well, the desire for a name is a desire for significance. To know that you are someone, to know that you're valuable. A name is a way of saying, I need to be worthwhile. And that desire isn't a bad one at all. It's actually essential to being a human. It's what all of us need. It's what we were made for. But we were made to get that name in relation to God. It was by knowing God that anyone was to know themselves. The smile of his face, the knowledge of his love was all of the affirmation that any of us ever needed. But Babel will show us the problem we've got now. Sin means that we lost that. Sin means that we lost it, and ever since then, we are trying to recapture it. We turned away from God, and when we turn away from God, do you know what happens? We don't just lose him. Do you know what else we lose? Ourselves. You turn away from God, you don't just lose him, you lose you. But you never lose the desire for a name, the need to know you count for something. Think about life. Think about the way that we live. So much of what we do is seeking to get exactly this. And we look to so many different places, image, money, relationships. You go an endless list. So much of what drives us is really this simple desire to find a name, to know that we count, to know we have significance. But Babel shows it's not going to go deep enough. Any attempt to try and do that without God will end up just feeling hollow. Even worse, it will lead to suffering and it will lead to chaos. See, that makes sense of why people treat other people so badly. It's a famous theologian, Martin Luther, and he used to describe sin as a relentless curve inwards that our hearts now have. A relentless curve inwards. What he meant was sin makes us ever focused on the inside, on us. Now, do you see what that means when we treat other people, for how we treat other people? It means when I approach somebody, my sinful heart expects other people to constantly bend towards me. But you see the problem? Everybody I meet has a heart that says exactly the same thing, and they expect me to bend towards them. And so immediately you have two people. One saying, well, this is the bend to you should be changing for me. The other saying, well, you should be changing for me. And that's why we so often find other people so frustrating. It's why so often we keep other people at arm's length, why we feel threatened by others. We see other people in relation to ourselves. What matters most then is my way. It is my path. It is my direction. And by the way, do you know, that is why every Disney movie changed, and I'm a father of 4, I'm well versed in this. It changed from being, the plot of every Disney movie essentially was, you need to find someone to rescue you from the outside. But now, that's what every Disney story really was about. But now, do you know what every Disney story is about? It's about searching on the inside. It is about finding your own path. And nobody can get in the way of that. Now, I'm not here to dissect Disney. Yeah, we can have fun doing that. I'm not here to make judgments on either way. But all I'm saying is that, do you understand we're all tower builders now? And no person, no belief, no cultural rules and values can ever get in the way of that. They're further on than this sermon is. We're going to get there, though. We try and keep our empires together at all costs. And that's disastrous at a personal level. At a national level, it's the cause of wars, untold miseries, just rivers of blood. This is the problem of the human heart. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing. What do we say about human community in Babel? Well, look, here's the first thing. You see the power of human community. Let's start there. Babel is not just about what they have done. It's also about what they might do. It's about human potential. God sees the ability, verse 6, he puts it this way, for them to do the impossible. He says if they've already done this, what else will they be able to do? Now think about that. Human ability is extraordinary. We've split the atom, we've spliced the gene, we've sent people into space. Human beings working together can do amazing things. Why? Because if you go back and you read the start of the Bible, Genesis 1 and 2, God makes Adam and Eve in his image. That means so many different things, but one of the things it means is that we are creative. God is the great creator. We are sub-creators. We reflect God's creative genius. So at one level, Babel is just that. It's human beings coming together to work, to develop, to create. That's why they invent new building techniques. Listen to these cutting-edge technologies. Verse 3, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They use brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. That's why they can go up so high, because together they come and they're developing new forms of technology. There is something about the dignity and uniqueness of human beings. God has an astonishingly high estimate here of human capability. So why is it a problem? Why does he step in to frustrate it? Because that's exactly what he does. Look from verse 6. The Lord came down to the city and the tower that the people were building. The Lord said, if one people speaking the same language have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they stopped building the city. Now, we've more to say on this in a moment, but just for now, all that capacity, all the potential that God gave us as human beings was about working to glorify him, to build something for his name, to create, to glorify him. But Babel shows you the dark side. And it is a dark side, and you know it already. Human ability doesn't always lead to good things. We split the atom and made a bomb. We send people into space and create a race for national pride. We develop amazing technology and we use it to fuel addictions and exploit weaknesses. Gifts and abilities are incredible, but they can also threaten ourselves and others. There's a dark side. But listen, the problem with Babel is not community. The problem with Babel is not human capacity. It's not human genius. It's not human ability. God is not insecure. God made us with those capacities. What's the problem? It's how we use them. Let me ask you this. Is a hammer good or bad? Depends what you do with it. Use it to build something useful and beautiful. A hammer is great. Use it to smash and destroy and damage. A hammer's terrible. The issue is not for us the huge capacity we've got. The huge capacity we've got together is what we do with it. And all too often, we come together to exalt ourselves above God. And that is why the tower is such a perfect picture. We build up, why? To bring God down. To remove God from his place. To take the seat that only ever can belong to him. See the power of human community? But you got to see the limits as well. The limits, because verse 5 says God comes down to look. The image of the writer here is it's slightly comic. That this is an attempt to build to heaven. This is the best humanity can do, to build up to heaven, but it's so feeble. The sense is that God has to come down just to stoop to glimpse it, because it's so tiny. See, as a kid, I was thinking of this just recently with my brother. We decided to dig a hole. My family on my mum's side are Australian, and we decided that was the aim. We were more ambitious than we were intelligent. So we decided to dig down, and we spent a day. We were allotted a part of the garden, a little corner at the back, and we dug all day, and we really went for it. I mean, we really went for it. And I think we were probably, see, I've written in my notes here, I said I think we were chest high. That sounds I think I've exaggerated that. Let's say knee high, maybe waist high. we thought we'd done amazingly, and we were so pleased. And my mum comes out at the end of the day, and I can remember this now. She peers into the hole. She smiled. We said, "Isn't it amazing? We're gonna show you your relatives soon, Mum." She pats us on the head and she just says, "Well done, dear. Come in for your tea." It's a lovely mum's way of saying it's pathetic. You think you're gonna reach Australia that way? Well done, kid. There's a sense of that here. Sit. It's your attempt to build to heaven. So God puts an end to it all in a moment. The tower, the city building stop, the language is confused, the people are scattered. What we see here is the total humbling of human pride. You know, I said there's a lot of wordplay in the passage. Babel also means Babylon. This is where the city is built. Now, if you know the Bible, you'll be familiar with that word. It was a literal city, but in the Bible, it becomes a shorthand, a symbol, a symbolic way of summing up everything that stands against God. In other words, this is a picture of how the world used to work, how the world still works. Babel didn't just happen here. The point of the narrative is it happens and happens and happens over and over and over again. And it's always humbled. It is always left in ruins. Remember Toy Story and Buzz Lightyear? Amazing space toy. He turns up in this room full of toys who come to life as soon as the humans go. And he's convinced he has laser beams. He's convinced he's on an intergalactic mission to destroy the evil Emperor Zurg. And best of all, he can fly. And every single toy in the room is utterly amazed at Buzz. But Woody, good old Woody. Woody the cowboy, he sees through. He knows it's smoke and mirrors. And everyone else sees this instance where he kind of bounces off a ball and ends up kind of spinning around. They say, he can fly. And here's what Woody turns around and he says, that's not flying. That's just falling with style. That's Babel. That's humanity ever since. We're not flying. We're just falling with style. An unstable tower is just about the perfect symbol for human overreach. So in that sense, human community is impossible. It just doesn't work as we want it to. That's the end state here, the great Babylon, symbol of human initiative, technological wonder, just ends in confusion and scattering. One last bit of wordplay. Babel also sounds like the Hebrew word for confused, similar to our word Babel, and that's how human societies end. That's now where we find ourselves, confusion. Why? Because you lose harmony with God and everything else goes out of tune. You get rid of the conductor of an orchestra and everyone ends up playing what they want. They play how they feel, different keys, different speeds, discordant noise. It will not work. Same with us. Human community is impossible to flourish properly when you seek to get rid of God. We can do amazing things. We can do meaningful, beautiful things. But without God, we will never have harmony together. And did you see the irony too? All of this leads to their worst fears. Verse 4, Babel says, we don't want to be scattered, so let's build up. They don't want this broken up, but where does it end? With exactly that. Human heart, human community. Here's the last thing. Let's look at the response of God. Now, I want to show you an obvious response and then a less obvious one. And then we'll draw it to a close. Let me start with the obvious one. The obvious one is that we see judgment from God. This is short, but it is really important. You can't miss this. The text begins, verse 1, one language, ends in verse 9, confused languages. It begins, verse 1, one group of people, ends, verse 9, with a scattered group of people. The people try to build up in pride, but God comes down in judgment. God comes to judge the sin. And it shows you just how serious sin is. Do you see that? And here is why. Sin is not just some naughty things. Sin is an attempt at reordering what God has ordered the universe to run as. It is a cosmic reordering. That's what it is, an attempt to take God's place. But it can't happen. It can't happen. God can't allow his godness to be challenged. Why? Because the whole universe breaks apart if he does. See, the universe would fall apart if God let us take his place. Only God can be God. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. He sustains all things. Nobody else can do that. Nothing else can do that. God cannot allow humans to succeed in playing at God. So Babel is a descent of judgment. It is. Now, this section of the Bible is part of a wider unit. Genesis 1 to 11 is very, very deliberately written. It's crafted in a specific way. And when you read these chapters carefully, here's what you see emerge. There's a pattern. Here's the pattern. It goes like this: sin and a spread of sin. So from the moment Adam and Eve turn away from God, sin spreads, an avalanche that grows and grows and grows. Disobedience, envy, anger, murder, lust, greed, violence, corruption. It's this horrible descent. The Bible begins with God bringing order and beauty to chaos. And in sin, human beings bring chaos back into the world. And so east of Eden, life without God descends into disorder and chaos. So you see sin, and here's the next step of the pattern. It brings a judgment from God. God comes and he has to address the sin. Human sin demands justice from God. So that's the pattern. You see sin, you see judgment, but here's what else you see in these early chapters of Genesis: grace. There is always grace. Sin, yes. Judgment, yes. But then grace and mercy flow from God. So no matter how drastic the situation gets, no matter how serious the sin gets, no matter how badly it destroys what God made good, God's grace never fails to provide a way. It's incredible. And it's a constant pattern that you read in Genesis 1 to 11. But then you get to Babel. And Babel ends like this. Verse 9. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord scattered the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Babel. Sin? Yes. Judgment? Yes. Where's the grace? Where's the grace? Mumford & Sons wrote an album, second album called Babel. And on the song with the same title from that album, they use this story. They use the image. And it runs like this. It says, like the city that nurtured my greed and my pride, I stretched my arms into the sky. I cried, Babel, Babel, look at me now. For the walls of my tower, they come tumbling down. And now, the question that haunts the end of verse 9 is summed up perfectly. They sing, so where will we stand in the winds that now howl? That's what you're left with at the end of Babel. Where's the grace? Is there anything left but howling wilderness? Is there any hope for us here? Well, here is the wonderful news. The grace will come, but it's going to take a while. In fact, grace will follow, and you can argue that the whole of the Bible from here onwards is an answer to the question left hanging at the end of Babel. Is God finished? Is he done? And here's what you find. Not only is God not done, his grace has only just begun. And let me take you to the point in the Bible, right towards the other end, where you see all of this focused down most clearly. It comes after the death and the resurrection of Jesus, and a book called the Acts of the Apostles picks up the story from there on in. And very famously, at the start of Acts, you have Pentecost. Have you heard of Pentecost? Pentecost is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And just listen. Just listen to how Pentecost is described in Acts chapter 2. Bear with me as I just read a few verses here. Acts 2 verse 1, when the day of Pentecost came, they were all together, that's the Christians in one place. Suddenly, a sound like a blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues or languages as the Spirit enabled them. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one had heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, all the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongue. Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, what does this mean? Do you know what it means? Do you know the significance? What happened at Babel? At Babel, tongues are confused and the nations are divided, scattering in confusion, but as the Spirit falls, as Pentecost comes, what happens? Tongues of fire come down. The tongues rest on the church, and those tongues bring a common understanding. They bring unity, not division. They bring a common glorious gathering instead of a scattering. Languages are spoken, multiple languages, but this time not confused. Instead, people from all the nations hear the gospel, and this time for the glory of God. For his name, not for theirs. This is God's glorious answer to Babel. We are scattered at Babel by sin. We are gathered at Pentecost by the Spirit. And you know the reason the Spirit can be poured out is because Jesus first descends in humility. Babel is about building upwards in pride, but Jesus comes downwards in humility. Jesus steps down into the howling wilderness. Jesus comes down from the glory of heaven to be crucified east of Eden. The Son of God descends, but this time he comes to take the judgment, not give the judgment. This time he bears the punishment so we can know our sin dealt with, so that through him we can know safety and security, so we can know finally who we are. So we can have the name that we search for in every other thing, a name that will last forever. Would you like to know the crazy thing? The crazy thing is that the best news in a sermon series called Up is actually the word down. It's down. Jesus comes down to save. Do you see how lost you are without him? Do you see how much you need him? Do you see what he's done in coming down for you? Let me finish with this. See how practical Babel is? This ancient story allows us to be brutally realistic but gloriously hopeful. Here's the brutal realism. Do you want to know why you can't get on with the person next to you? Sorry if that made it awkward. A hypothetical person next to you. You want to know why we divide, why we draw constant lines, why humanity is so tribal, why it's dog eat dog? Babel gives you the answer. This is not just a pretty story. Do you see that? We want to make a name. We want to use others for our own ends. We're confused. Sin always brings scattering. It always brings division. Class against class, race against race, person against person. It's why families, why your workplace, why friendships can just be so hard. Babel says, all Human community is fragile. It's unsustainable if it's a project without God. You know what? The facts bear it out over and over again. Nothing ever has worked. Babel casts its long shadow still. You've got to be realistic about it. But you can be hopeful. Because even though our sin broke it, God fixed it. Only He can remake the brokenness, which is why we can also be hopeful. Look at the hope of Pentecost. When the Spirit came down to reverse the curse of Babel, instead of confusing tongues as a result of sin, He brings clarity. He brings understanding. The Holy Spirit comes to create a renewed community, a unified, diverse community. Do you know what that community can begin to look like with His help? Let me read just from the ends of Acts chapter 2. This is what it says. Acts 2 describes the community that the Holy Spirit builds, that the Holy Spirit brings. They devoted themselves, Acts 2 verse 42, to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. I love this. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. That's the church. Instead of a people coming together to make a name for themselves, the Spirit creates a group who delight in praising the name of God. Community of peace and joy and harmony and generosity. That's what the church community can become, the seed of a new world coming. The taste of the kingdom of heaven here on earth, a sign of what human community is heading for in the future. Do you think we can possibly be that together as a church on our own? Do you think we have any hope of achieving that just through effort? We will not be that. We cannot be that, but for the Holy Spirit, but for His work in reversing Babel.